Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Students, in the previous module we discussed about the National Land Use Policy. This module is the continuation of the previous module, and in this module we will discuss about the current land use planning and utilization trends, urban area planning, industrial investment zones planning, eco-sensitive area planning, mining area planning, watershed management for productivity of agricultural lands, coastal zone planning, land administration, land use boards, relevant existing policies, guiding principles for the National Land Utilization Policy, objectives of the National Land Utilization Policy, overall approach, guiding framework for states, identifying land utilization zones, management of land utilization zones, planning of land utilization zones, identification of land utilization zones, key considerations for planning management of land utilization zones, policies, acts and programs that have a bearing on land resources. The current land use planning and utilization trends. Urban area planning. The Urban Development Plans Formulation and Implementation Guidelines 1996 suggested urban development of planning system. The system consisted of a set of 4 plans. First plan was perspective plan. The lifespan of this policy plan was 20 to 25 years and was related to the socio-economic development of the settlement. Second was the development plan. The lifespan of this plan was 5 years and was associated with the spatial economic development of the urban areas. Third plan is annual plan. This plan contains the official and physical details of the recent and ongoing projects. This plan needs to be implemented by the local authorities during the corresponding financial year. Plans of projects or schemes. This plan contains the complete layouts for implementation by a private or public agency. Master and development plans, they are prepared for metropolitan and urban areas. Regional plans, they are also prepared occasionally. For example, plan for National Capital Region of Delhi. The master or development plans, they are prepared by the development authorities, town planning departments or urban local bodies. If regional plans are not prepared, then the human population will expand into rural areas and farmlands. 2.25% of India's land will be brought under planned development if the urban areas of the country, they are well planned. Coming to the Industrial Investment Zones Planning. National Manufacturing Policy 2011 of the Government of India stimulates integrated industrial townships and preparation of eco-friendly developmental plans. The regional or state level authorities such as Infrastructure Development Boards and Industrial Development Corporation, they identify locations for investment zones, special economic zones, industrial estates, industrial corridors and prepare master plans for these areas. If there is proper land use planning of industrial areas in India, then 1% of India's land will be brought under planned development. Next planning is related to eco-sensitive area planning. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India and Environment Protection Act 1986 notified the eco-sensitive zones. Further development in these sensitive areas involves preparation of zonal development or master plans. These plans will guide further development in these areas. Ecosystem zones are the areas which contain those natural resources that are having unique values like flora, fauna and water resources. Since these zones are highly threatened, therefore they need special consideration for their protection. These eco-sensitive zones, they include wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, conservation and community reserves and represent about 4.79% of the total geographic area of India. Other areas including landscape areas, aesthetic and historical areas, they also come under the category of ecosensitive zones. The main aim of declaring certain areas as ecosensitive zones is to create a specialized ecosystem that needs to be conserved and protected. These are the transition zones that vary from high protection areas to lesser protection areas. The nature of these areas is regulatory, not prohibitive. 5% of India's land will come under planned development if ecosystem zones are notified and properly planned. Next is the planning of mining area. Mineral concession or mining lease is allotted for mineral extraction. Moreover, the allotted mine is operated in compliance to all applicable laws. If proper mining plans such as environmental management plan are not framed, then mining lease would not be granted to any public or private party. However, the management plan should be fully accepted and enforced by statutory authorities. 0.17% of India's total land area will come under planned development if the process of mining area planning is initiated. Watershed management for productivity of agricultural lands. In order to increase the productivity of marginalized land, some schemes were started by Government of India. These schemes were centrally sponsored and included Desert Development Program, Drought Prone Area Program and Integrated Wasteland Development Program. In 2009, all these schemes were merged under single scheme, that is Integrated Watershed Management Program. This scheme covered both the marginal lands as well as rain-fed agricultural areas. The watershed areas could also come under planned development if these get associated with land use planning. Next is the planning associated with coastal zone, that is coastal zone planning. Coastal areas contain abundant resources, rich biodiversity and productive habitats and also play a crucial role in promoting India's economy. Coastal zone is also gifted with a wide range of ecosystems like coral reefs, mangroves, salt marshes, sea grasses, estuaries, sand dunes, lagoons, etc. These ecosystems, they are characterized by distinct ecosystem services and abiotic and biotic processes. In the past years, the incidences of urban sprawl, accelerated development and urbanization, they have shown an increase. These activities have put terrific pressure on the fragile environment of the coastal areas. As a result, ecosystem services and coastal resources, they are facing degradation. Now, why they are facing degradation? Due to the over exploitation of natural resources and unplanned developmental activities. In order to protect and conserve the coastal environment, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and Government of India issued the Coastal Regulation Zone Notification 1991 under the Environment Protection Act 1986. This notification is responsible for the regulation of developmental activities in the coastal areas. Certain restrictions, they were imposed on the land use in the coastal areas according to this notification. Integrated Coastal Zone Management project was initiated by Government of India in association with World Bank for implementing complete coastal management plan in India and piloting the same approach in states like Orissa, Gujarat and others. Next is the land administration. Two centrally sponsored programs, that is computerization of land records and strengthening of revenue administration, updating of land records, they were launched by Government of India. The main aim of these programs was the improvement of revenue administration and land records in India. Later on, these programs, they were merged to revitalize the agenda of land administration into a single program, that is National Land Records Modernization Program. The main aim of this program was to maintain updated records of land use, land transactions, connectivity between revenue and registration systems. Land use boards. State land use boards, they were established in 1970 under the chairmanship of Chief Minister of the states at that time. These boards they provided policy directions and coordinated the activities of those departments that were dealing with soil and land resources. However, these boards realized that it was the wastage of time and never functioned the way they were meant for, and most of them have been abolished. Currently, the states do not have any policy to deal with land use issues in a logical manner. Hence, the responses of the states to land issues they are spontaneous, non-consistent and unplanned. Relevant existing policies. Policies that are related to land use include National Forest Policy 1988, National Land Use Policy Outlines 1988 Policy, Statement of Abatement of Pollution 1992, National Livestock Policy Perspective 1996, National Agricultural Policy 2000, National Population Policy 2000, National Policy and Macro Level Strategy and Action Plan on Biodiversity 2000, National Environmental Policy 2006 and National Water Policy 2013. Guiding principles for the National Land Use Policy. The first principle is the primary concerns for sustainable development include human beings. They are supposed to live a productive and healthy life in harmony with the nature. Second principle is the involvement of equal opportunities in terms of gender equality, inclusive growth and poverty eradication. The three mentioned factors, they are crucial desires for sustainable development of the country. These factors must be addressed in all programs, policies and plans. Third principle is the balanced development and intergenerational justice. Development activities in various sectors, they must be planned in a balanced manner so as to meet the socio-economic and environmental needs of the present and upcoming generations. The developmental activities should be minimize the population displacement on large scale. Fourth principle is the efficient utilization of resources and mitigation of impacts. Optimum utilization of land use resources is essential. Moreover, projects should be set up on wastelands, unirrigated lands, recycled lands or degraded lands. Fifth principle is the integrated and comprehensive development planning. Development planning that must be sustainable and comprehensive. The interest of stakeholders and various sectors should be taken into consideration for the development of plans. Sixth principle, the states are custodians of the lands. The sole custodians of the land are states. Unsustainable patterns of land utilization and management must be neglected by the state governments. State governments must provide legal support to facilitate land use planning. Seventh principle is harmonization with the existing policy, legislative and regulatory framework. The existing laws, standards, guidelines, procedures and constitutional provisions and rights applicable for land use policy as framed by Government of India, various departments and ministries, they shall be continued for making decisions on land use changes. Now coming to the objectives of the National Land Utilization Policy. Objectives related to social concerns. Protection of agricultural lands from land use conversions so as to ensure food security and to meet consumption needs of a growing population and to meet the livelihood needs of the dependent population. To identify and protect lands that are required to promote and support social development, particularly of tribal communities and poor sections of society for their livelihood. To preserve historic and cultural heritage by protecting places of religious, archaeological, scenic and tourist importance. Next are the objectives that are related to environmental concerns. To preserve and conserve lands under important environmental functions such as those declared as national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, reserved forests, eco-sensitive zones, etc., and guide land uses around such preserved and conserved areas so as not to have land use conflicts or negative environmental impacts. to preserve the areas of natural environment and its resources that provide ecosystem services. Next is the objectives that are related to development or economic concerns to promote properly guided and coordinated development in a sustainable manner of all development sectors including agriculture, urban industrial, infrastructure and mining so as to minimize land use conflicts or negative environmental impacts. Next are the objectives that are related to the enforcement and implementation of the policy. To suggest a general implementation framework for implementing land utilization policy by all concerned at different levels, that is national, state, regional and local, and undertaking the capacity building. Overall approach includes guiding framework for states. National land utilization policy fulfills the criteria of framing guidelines for the preparation of land utilization policies. Second is the identifying land utilization zones. The dominating functions of land environmental and developmental sectors, they are taken into consideration by national land utilization policy. Moreover, the laws and approaches responsible for governing land uses are also taken into consideration. Indian lands are classified into different land utilization zones. These land utilization zones, they will be the focus areas for framing land utilization policies. Management of land utilization zones. Land utilization zones are further divided into different land use management areas for the purpose of land protection, management, regulation and control in accordance with priority needs and legal provisions of different sectors. Next is the planning of land utilization zones. Land use planning designates the use of land for urban, rural and industrial development and environmental conservation and protection. Land use planning will improve the socio-economic performance, well-being and efficiency of community. Land use planning can be taken either independently or integrated with regional, district, master or zonal development plans. Identification of land utilization zones. Land utilization zones, they are divided into 6 categories: rural and agricultural areas, areas under alteration, urban areas, industrial areas, ecological, tourism, heritage and landscape conservation areas. Vulnerable areas. Relevant aspects like legal status, land potential, land use change pattern and socio-economic needs, they should be taken into consideration while deciding the predominant use of land use. In order to make the planning and management of land utilization zones simpler, the extent of land utilization zones should be matched with the existing boundaries of panchayats and districts, etc. Land utilization zones. First is the rural and agricultural areas. Dominant rural and agricultural areas include agricultural land areas that are extensively used, land areas containing fertile soils, high production areas, irrigation project areas. Now, the population of an area that is totally dependent on agriculture as a source of livelihood, tribal and rural development areas. Now comes those areas that are under alteration or transformation. Areas where agricultural land is getting transformed into non-agricultural land are known as areas under transformation. Areas included under this category are rural components of large cities, peri-urban areas of metropolitan cities, development corridors between two metropolitan cities and extremely urbanizing districts. Next areas under land utilization zones are urban areas. Urban areas are those areas that are necessary for fulfilling the urbanization demands of the country. These areas included in this category are state or national capitals, metropolitan urban areas, million plus population and urban corridors. Industrial areas include industrial corridors, special industrial regions, petrochemical investment regions and industrial estates. Land utilization zones include ecological, landscape, conservation, tourism and heritage areas. Areas included under this category are ecological areas. Ecological areas, they include eco-sensitive areas such as national parks, biosphere reserves, coastal zones and wildlife sanctuaries, etc. Since these areas, they provide ecosystem services, therefore several environment and forest acts have been made. These areas also include water bodies, mining areas containing mineral resources, landscape conservation tourism areas, the areas having scenic beauty and attractive landscape, heritage areas. Heritage areas include World Heritage Sites, historic religious areas, areas having monuments of national or state level significance. Next type of areas are vulnerable areas. Areas vulnerable to man-made and natural hazards, they are included in this category. Industrial areas having potential to cause major accidents. Areas susceptible to natural disasters like drought, floods, earthquakes, tsunami, etc. Areas other than industrial hazards like chemical or gas pipelines or harbors and ports. Key considerations for planning management of land utilization zones include: first is land resources of the country should be used in optimum way so as to achieve sustainable development and to provide a framework for the state authorities so as to formulate land utilization policies. Second is the conversion of agricultural lands into non-agricultural lands, it should be avoided. Third is to make it sure that the rights of the tribal and poor people on the common land are protected. Fourth is the historic, cultural, religious, tourist and archaeological sites should be protected and conserved. Fifth one is natural environment and the resources that are providing ecosystem services should be conserved. Sixth is the development in different sectors should be promoted in a coordinated and sustainable manner to avoid land use conflicts or adverse environmental impacts. Seventh is the regional approaches should be used to cope up with growing urbanization demands. Eighth is the area under industries or industrial estates should be reduced for optimal land utilization. Ninth point is the mineral bearing area should be avoided for mining purpose. And 10th point is that while planning for transportation networks, the land use conflicts should be avoided. These areas should be preferably integrated with state, regional or district plans. Areas under cultural heritage, historic places, tourism areas, religious places of interest, etc., they should be protected. Proper care should be taken while preparing land use plans. Policies, acts and programs that have a bearing on land resources. First policy is Drought Prone Area Program. It was started in 1973 to 74. Next policy is Desert Development Program. It was started in 1977 to 1978. Next policy was Integrated Watershed Management and the year of implementation was 1980 to 81. Next policy is National Land Use and Wasteland Development Council and was implemented in the year 1985. Next policy is the National Land Use and Conservation Board and it was implemented in the year 1985. The salient features were the board was responsible for the formulation of plans and policy for management, conservation and development of India's land resources, to make certain implementations so as to check the conversion of agricultural area to non-agricultural areas and to coordinate with the state authorities. Next policy is National Wasteland Development Board. It was implemented in 1985. The board was responsible for the wasteland development and management programs in India, and its feature was to classify wastelands in India and to assess the progress of various schemes and programs that have been made for wasteland development. Next policy or program, it was started in 1985 to 86 and it was National Watershed Development Projects for Rainfed Areas. The main aim of this program was the ecological restoration and improvement in crop productivity. Next policy was land use policy, that is National Land Use Policy, started in year 1988, and its salient feature was to prevent degradation of land resources, to re-establish degraded lands to their original state, and to establish different committees to look into the matter of land use. Next policy is Integrated Wasteland Development Project, and it was implemented in the year 1989 to 90, and its salient features were to adopt certain practices like trenching, vegetative barriers, bunding, terracing, etc. for soil conservation, and to enhance the participation of local people's development program associated with wasteland. Next policy was Constitution 73rd Amendment Act 1992. It was implemented in the year 1992, and the salient features were the land related issues were given to Panchayati Raj institutions, and the act dealt with the participation of local governments like district and state levels for land use planning. Next policy was the Constitution 74th Amendment Act 1992. It was started in the year 1992, and its salient features included urban and land use planning was operated under the power of urban self-governing bodies. Next policy or program was under the Department of Wastelands Development in the Ministry of Rural Development. It was implemented in the year 1992, and its feature was to promote and development watershed approach. Next policy or scheme was Investment Promotional Scheme. It was started in year 1994 to 95, and its feature was to convert waste land in non-forest areas. Next policy was the development of land resources. It was implemented in the year 1999, and its feature was to formulate policies for the management of integrated land resources and to implement land-based development programs. Students, in this module we discussed about the definition of land, its classification, different land use planning systems and the different policies. Thank you.